We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The city sky tonight was gray, rain tapping against the newsroom windows. Clara Hayes sat before her computer screen, fingers typing relentlessly on the keyboard. Every word that appeared felt like a blade cutting deep into her chest. At the top of the draft, there were only two words: Ryan Moretti. That name loomed like a shadow over the entire city. A man so powerful he could topple a business with a single phone call. People called him the boss in the shadows, the one pulling the strings of the underworld, with influence reaching even into politics. To Clara, he was the perfect subject for an exposé, but the more she wrote, the more a vague sense of fear began to rise within her. On the desk lay a thick stack of printed documents, shady financial records, testimonies from hidden witnesses, security camera stills. Everything pointed to one man, a man ruthless enough to crush anyone who stood in his way. Clara leaned back in her chair, burying her face in her hands. What am I doing? The question echoed in her mind for what felt like the 100th time. Journalism had always been her ideal career choice. She once believed the truth would set people free. But would anyone dare to face the truth about Ryan Moretti? And when the article was published, would she become a hero? Or just another pawn swept off the board? The phone buzzed on her desk. Clara picked it up and saw the editor-in-chief's number. Clara, how's it going? We need that piece for the weekend edition. The whole newsroom is counting on you. She drew in a deep breath, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. I'm almost done. But sir, if we publish this, he won't stay quiet. The entire newsroom could be in danger. Danger has always been the price of truth. You know that, Clara. The call ended, leaving only the sound of rain against the glass, and Clara's frantic heartbeat. Across the city, in a room bathed in golden light, Ryan Moretti sat alone. A glass of whiskey shimmered before him. The man's cold gray eyes looked like a storm waiting to break. A subordinate entered and bowed. Sir, there's news. The Herald Times is investigating you. A reporter named Clara Hayes. Ryan froze, his finger pausing on the rim of the swirling glass. A name, one he thought long buried, suddenly rose to the surface. He gave a faint, ironic smile, though his eyes grew distant. Clara Hayes. The sound of her name and his voice chilled the room by a few degrees. But instead of anger, Ryan simply turned the glass in his hand. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. Half amusement, half warning. A memory stirred. A young woman at a journalism conference 6 years ago, brown hair falling loose, eyes blazing as she stood tall before the entire hall. She had once faced him, fearless, after he delivered a speech on the power of wealth and influence. She had smirked and said, "No, true power is truth. It cannot be bought." He never forgot that look, beautiful and unyielding. Now that same girl had become an investigative journalist, and the cruel irony was that the man she had chosen as her target was him. Ryan's lips curved, his voice dropping to a murmur meant only for himself. Let's see how far you'll go, Clara. Midnight came, yet Clara still hadn't left the newsroom. She stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the city glowing beneath the rain. From here, every light seemed small, but she knew one of those towering buildings belonged to Ryan Moretti. A man who could make the entire city bow. And now she, a mere journalist, was about to point her pen straight at him. Clutching her notebook tight, she traced the trembling words written by witnesses, their accounts of fear. Each line was a wound. However, there is also proof. Ryan Moretti was not untouchable. In the wind and rain, Clara whispered, if making a vow to herself, the truth will be written. But deep in her heart, she didn't know that vow was also the beginning of a tragedy, because with every step she took toward Ryan, she was being pulled into his world, a world where love and danger entwined, where truth could either save them or destroy them both. The ballroom of the Aurelia Hotel shone as bright as day beneath rows of crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and wine, laced with the gilded laughter of the elite. Clara straightened her back and walked across the red carpet as if she belonged there. The off-shoulder black gown, borrowed from the newsroom's costume closet, fit snugly, while a pearl hairpin concealed a micro camera. Inside her slim clutch, the recorder ran silently, its tiny light blinking like a heartbeat. The name tag on her chest read, Mia Clark, PR fake, but a mask only needed to last long enough to reach the storm's eye. She moved along the edge of the room, eyes scanning quickly. A cluster of politicians by the bronze statue, tech moguls near the windows, and real reporters kept outside the hallway. And at the center, drawing every gaze like a gravity point, him, Ryan Moretti. The tuxedo fit as if tailored from breath itself. Silver cufflinks, a vintage watch on his left wrist. He stood in a circle of people, listening more than speaking, silent more than boastful. Some whispered, "A devil wearing a saint's smile." Others raised their glasses as if to a savior. But Clara, in the lens of the tiny camera hidden in her hairpin, captured only a face calm to the point of danger. Invitation and PR badge. A rough voice came from just behind her shoulder. A large man in a dark tie, earpiece in his ear. His eyes didn't smile. Clara turned, slipping into the perfect tone of charm. "I just came from the check-in desk. They told me to head straight to the media wall." She tilted her head so the light hit her pearl earring. "Would you like me to call Serena from the organizing committee?" He stared at her a beat longer, measuring even her breath. A tiny tilt of his head, small enough to miss, but Clara caught it. He was listening to instructions through his earpiece. "Go," he muttered. "Don't wander." "No promises." She smiled and walked past him before the smile had time to fade. At the edge of the room, a silver-haired woman was speaking about a children's medical fund. Her name was Elena Voss, director of St. Gabriel's Hospital. Clara edged closer, pretending to study the wine list, ears straining for every word. "Thanks to this year's anonymous donation, we were able to open an additional neonatal heart surgery unit." "Excuse me," Clara cut in smoothly, voice silk smooth with PR polish. "Could you share the donor's name for the acknowledgement statement?" Elena gave a polite smile. "Anonymous is anonymous, my dear." "Just so we can arrange the honorary seating tonight?" "Elena." A deep male voice, soft as velvet, cut her off. Clara knew it before she turned. Her heart skipped a beat. Ryan was standing beside her, though she hadn't noticed when he'd approached. Up close, she caught the scent of cedarwood laced with smoky whiskey, a calm fragrance that somehow froze her blood. "Don't let PR give you trouble," he said, his gaze touching her face for half a second, yet enough to scorch the thin mask she wore. That look didn't just recognize, it remembered. He turned fully toward her, courteous as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Lost track of which part of the program you belong to, Clara?" Her real name fell onto the marble floor like a slip of the tongue, echoing. She smiled, thin as a blade. "You remember better than I expected, Mr. Moretti." "Good words stay in memory." He shrugged, the corner of his mouth twitching upward by a millimeter. 6 years ago, a journalism conference. You said, "True power is truth. It cannot be bought." His gray eyes caught the light from the chandelier. Still, timely, even now. A waltz began, the strings flowing smooth as water. Ryan extended his hand, the effortless gesture of a man who was never refused. "A dance? Before you, PR, head back to the media wall." Clara stared at that hand, long fingers, fine joints, a faint scar at the base of his thumb, a detail she wished she didn't remember. She placed her hand in his, not for courtesy or music, but because here, in the very center of his heavily guarded circle, was the safest place to converse freely. They merged into the crowd. His hand rested at her back, just enough, warm, steady, and controlling. That warmth bled through the fabric, and Clara resented her body for betraying her reason. "Herald Times has been recruiting interesting PR lately," Ryan said, his laugh faint, cold even from an arm's length away. "We like people who are curious," Clara replied, her eyes fixed not on his face but on the flawless seam of his suit jacket. "But I prefer anonymous donations. They raise many questions." "Questions are your profession," he spun her once fluidly. "Answers sometimes need the right timing. Or the right person." The words slipped out before she could bite her tongue. For a moment, his hand pressed deeper against her back, not rough but deliberate. He leaned closer, voice slipping under the music. "You'll regret stepping into this." The words chilled the nape of her neck. Clara gave a soft laugh, though the cold had already crawled down her spine. "I've heard that before. From ministers to bankers. They usually don't like close-up shots." "He wasn't threatening," Ryan said, as if defending an absent man. "He was warning." "And you? What are you, Mr. Moretti?" Clara lifted her eyes to his for the first time. "A villain with clean hands or a saint with dirty ones?" His gray eyes lingered, amusement sparking like lightning. "Often the same person. To know which depends on where you choose to stand." "Where there's light." Her answer came too fast, a reflex. "Even if the light hurts the eyes. Light has its price." He paused, then spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "We don't always choose truth because it's right. We chose it because we can afford the cost." The music waned. They stopped at the edge of the dance floor. He released her first, so polite it felt almost like a gesture of grace. At a breath's distance, his voice dropped. "Drop the fake name, Clara. It doesn't suit you." His eyes flicked to her clutch. "And turn off the recorder inside. It's only captured your heartbeat all night." Her chest froze for a beat. Inside the clutch, the light still blinked, but she suddenly realized. Through the entire waltz, the audio track was impossibly clean. No clinking glasses, no rustling fabric. A perfect blanket of white noise. An audio jammer. "You're very thorough," she replied evenly, gripping the clutch tighter to still her trembling. "Blocking even the truth." "Protecting it," he corrected. "When truth is torn apart and sold like lottery tickets, someone has to keep it locked away." "In your vault," Clara tilted her head. "And who holds the key?" "If you're brave enough to take it." He stepped back. The burly guard from earlier stood 2 meters away, eyes sharp. Ryan didn't turn, but Clara knew. Every move she made was already inside his net. "Don't choose a path that makes you pray," Ryan said. "It wastes a good mind." "You're afraid I'll write the truth?" Clara asked, knowing it was both foolish and necessary. "I'm afraid you'll write too fast." He gave a faint smile. "Truth or not depends on the price you're willing to bear." A hotel waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. Ryan picked up a glass and handed it to her, like brushing away a gust of wind. "Drink, warm up, then go." "You're letting me go?" Clara arched a brow. Too easy, too loud. "Smart men don't cage strays in the living room." His glass clinked gently against hers. They opened the door and watched what it looks for. He walked past her. His suit brushed a breeze, cedar wood trailing like an unspoken promise. When Clara regained her senses, the guard had already stepped back, leaving a clear path to the hallway. The strings shifted into another melody. Outside, the city still glittered like a sky shaken awake. She left as quietly as she had entered. In the hall, she opened her clutch and pulled out the recorder. The screen displayed a flat line. Beneath it lay a small white card. She had no idea when it had been slipped inside. Only one line of black ink, old-fashioned fountain pen. "Moonlight. 2 o'clock. Choose your truth." No signature, no address. But Clara knew the name. Moonlight, a small jazz bar under Riverside Bridge, where the unmasked slipped away at dawn. She leaned against the wall, biting the inside of her cheek to ground herself. Her back still tingled where his hand had rested. "Don't be stupid, Hayes," she told herself. "This isn't just an op-ed. This is a man who can crush the entire newsroom with a gesture." But when she looked at the card again, she noticed the ink wavering ever so slightly at the last stroke, like the hesitation of someone who had never hesitated. A tiny detail, but one that struck her reporter's instinct. Behind the stone wall, there was a crack. Clara slipped the card away, switched off the recorder, and adjusted her hairpin. In the hallway mirror, her eyes looked brighter and more tired. "The game between a hunter and the kingpin," she murmured, "begins." Outside, the night rain had stopped. The city exhaled. And somewhere inside that crystal ballroom, a man with gray eyes lifted his glass once more, as if to toast the opening move of a chess game, and the girl who had chosen to stand in the light, even if the price might be her own heart. The night rain poured heavily, streetlights bleeding into pools of water. Clara pulled her coat collar higher and quickened her pace. The sensation of being followed burned hot at the nape of her neck, every hair on her skin standing on end. Her instincts weren't wrong. Footsteps slapped against the wet pavement. Steady, deliberate, not even trying to hide. Clara stole a glance at the fogged laundromat window. Its reflection showed a large figure behind her, broad-shouldered with long strides. Her throat went dry. He wasn't one of Ryan's guards, nor a stranger. That scar carved into his left cheek. She had seen it before, in the files of last year's investigation. Vincent Gallo, a filthy businessman, once a sly fox in the construction industry. Clara had written the series that exposed his corruption, the embezzling of resettlement funds. Less than a month after the articles were published, his company collapsed. He had vanished from the headlines. But he hadn't vanished at all. He was here. "You little bitch," Vincent growled, closing in. Clara gritted her teeth and darted into a narrow alley. Mistake. A dead end. His footsteps thundered closer, hammering into her chest like nails. Before she could turn, a rough hand clamped around her arm, slamming her against the damp brick wall. A blade flashed in the dark. "You write very well," he hissed, his breath stinking of liquor. "But tonight, no one's going to read a damn thing." Clara's heart pounded, breath ragged. Her trembling fingers fumbled inside her bag for the pepper spray. She raised it, but the knife had already slashed upward, its tip a few inches from her throat. Then suddenly, the darkness split apart. A fist cracked into Vincent's jaw. He staggered, the knife clattering onto the ground. Clara stumbled aside, gasping. When she looked up, Ryan Moretti stood there, rain-soaked shirt clinging to his frame, eyes colder than the storm itself. He bent, picked up the knife, and hurled it into a metal bin. The clang reverberated through the alley. Vincent tried to rise, but one swift kick from Ryan sent him crashing back. Groaning, he crawled into the shadows and disappeared like a rat. All that remained was rain, Clara's racing heart, and Ryan's piercing gray stare. "You always find ways to make yourself prey," he said quietly, his voice sharp as a blade. Clara pressed against the wall, still shaken. Why are you here?" Ryan shrugged as if it meant nothing. "Coincidence, but that man, he won't let you go. If you want to survive, you'd better come with me." "Come with you?" Clara gave a bitter laugh, trying to steady herself. "So you can lock me up as your hostage?" The corner of Ryan's mouth lifted, half mockery, half challenge. "Didn't you want to get close to me? This is your best chance." She froze. He had turned saving her into the perfect trap. Refuse, and she risked falling back into Vincent's hands. Or worse, accept, and she would be walking willingly into the lion's den. Clara gripped her bag tighter, her voice hoarse. "Fine, but only for tonight. Tomorrow I'm gone." His eyes flickered, not with surprise, but with satisfaction. He leaned down, murmuring near her ear. "One night, then. But Clara, remember this. In my world, nothing ever ends after just one night." He turned away first, leaving her frozen in place. And in that moment, Clara realized she had already lost control. The black car glided through the rain, carrying them to the glass tower Ryan called home. The penthouse opened before Clara, vast, cold, suffocating in its luxury. From here, the storm-drenched city below looked like a miniature map at her feet. Ryan set a glass of whiskey on the table and sank into a leather chair. Clara stood a few steps away, clutching her bag tight. "Welcome to the gilded cage," he said flatly. "Tonight, you're safe. Tomorrow, that's up to you." Clara turned toward the glass wall, staring out at the curtain of rain. In that moment, she knew she had stepped into a new game, one where every word, every glance was a trap. And the most dangerous part was that a piece of her felt safe, even as reason screamed this was only for one night. Ryan's penthouse was so quiet she could hear the second hand sweep across the face of the wall clock. Clara sat curled at the edge of the sofa, still in her rain-wrinkled evening gown, her dark hair damp and clinging. She hadn't spoken a word since stepping inside. Only silence, her eyes drifting now and then to the towering glass window overlooking a city drowned in night. As if reminding herself, this was a shelter, not a home. Ryan sat across from her, one hand around a glass of whiskey, the other resting lazily on the armrest. The soft gold light from the sconces accentuated his angular features, casting his face in a mix of shadow and steel. "You've been trembling this whole time," he said at last, voice low, uncertain if it was concern or mockery. Clara looked up, met his eyes, then quickly turned away. "I'm not trembling, just tired. Tired from fighting the whole world alone." He gave a small shrug, his gaze never leaving her face. "Brave, but foolish." The words stung her pride, but she had no strength left to fight back. The long day, the alley attack, the shock of having to take refuge with the very man she considered her enemy, all of it pressed on her like lead, weighing her eyelids down. She sank back against the sofa, exhaling. "I'm only here for one night. Don't think otherwise." Ryan tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curving into a faint smile. "One night is enough to change everything." The words lingered in the air, unsettling her. But exhaustion dulled her guard. She let her head fall, meaning to rest only for a moment before leaving. Instead of leaning against the backrest, her head tipped sideways, lightly brushing against Ryan's arm. He went still. The whiskey glass nearly slipped from his long fingers. Ryan looked down, her face so close, lashes fluttering, her breathing evening out. She had fallen asleep, and his heart, steady even in the midst of war and gunfire, suddenly stumbled off its rhythm. Ryan didn't move. He had seen enemies collapse, heard bullets fly past his ear, and signed contracts written in blood, but never had a woman fallen asleep on his arm and left his entire body paralyzed. Clara was unlike anyone. He remembered her clearly 6 years ago in that journalism hall, hair loose and eyes ablaze as she declared, "The truth cannot be bought." Back then, he'd only found her amusing. But now, with her asleep beside him, he realized it was that same pride that made it impossible to see her as he did other women, those who only ever bowed to power. Ryan studied her sleeping face. The sharpness of the journalist was gone, the defiant gaze nowhere in sight. What remained was a young woman, weary, fragile in a way she would never admit. A damp strand of hair clung to her cheek. His hand lifted instinctively, ready to brush it away. His fingers froze halfway, then withdrew. He couldn't allow himself, because Clara Hayes was no ally, much less a lover. She was the enemy, a pen sharp enough to reduce his empire to ashes. The only thing tying them together tonight was a temporary shelter, and yet his heart refused to obey reason. A distant clap of thunder. Clara flinched, brows knitting, but her head stayed against his arm. Her small hand curled, unconsciously clutching the fabric of his shirt as if seeking an anchor. Ryan shut his eyes, inhaling deeply. Every instinct screamed to pull her close, hold her tight. But the cold self he had built, the kingpin Moretti, forced him to stay still, locked in place. Between them, silence grew thick as stone. Only the steady patter of rain outside, echoing like a hidden heartbeat. Ryan whispered, so low it was nearly soundless, "You have no idea what you've just done to me, Clara." When the clock struck 3 a.m., Clara still slept peacefully. Ryan still sat there, his arm numb but unmoving. He let the discomfort spread, as if testing his own resolve. Because in this fragile moment, he was no longer the feared Moretti who held the city in his fist. He was just a man, realizing he had stumbled into the most dangerous game of all. Not money, not power, but the heart of a woman who dared to see him as an enemy. By morning, Clara would wake, wrap herself once more in the armor of a journalist, and insist it was only one night. Ryan knew that, but he also knew some moments were enough to change everything. And this moment, Clara sleeping on the arm of the most dangerous man in the city, would be the spark of a storm neither of them could foresee. Morning light streamed through the towering glass windows, brushing across Clara's drowsy face. She startled awake, realizing she was still on the sofa, a thin coat draped over her shoulders. Ryan's arm, which had rested on the back of the couch, was gone. He had slipped away at some point. The penthouse was utterly silent. No trace of the powerful kingpin remained, only a suffocating emptiness. Clara gripped her handbag tightly and stood. Just one night, she reminded herself, like a vow. But before leaving, her eyes caught a scrap of paper half buried among the stacks of files on the glass table. She hadn't meant to pry, but a few words stood out. St. Gabriel's Hospital Fund, $500,000 anonymous. Her heart skipped. An hour later, Clara stood in the lobby of St. Gabriel's Hospital, the very place where she had once reported on the lack of equipment for infant heart surgeries. She remembered the weary look on the head surgeon's face, the sigh. We've sent out dozens of funding requests, but no one cares. And yet today, the hospital was breaking ground on a brand new surgical unit, a red banner stretched across the entryway. Thanks to an anonymous donor, our dream has come true. Clara froze. A group of nurses passed by, chatting among themselves. That donor is truly generous. No name, no publicity. I heard it wasn't just the hospital. The Riverside orphanage got hundreds of thousands too. Someone like that can't possibly be a bad person. Clara swallowed hard, her chest in turmoil. That afternoon, she visited the Riverside orphanage, a dilapidated place once featured in her investigation series. Now the walls were freshly painted, and the playground was dotted with brand new swings and slides. Children's laughter rang through the yard as they circled the feet of the elderly caretaker. Excuse me, Clara said, showing her press badge. Could I ask, where did the funding for these renovations come from? The caretaker, Mrs. Martin, smiled kindly. We don't know. A man came on behalf of the donor, but said he wished to remain anonymous. He only left this message. These children deserve a home. Clara stood frozen. In her head, one name repeated over and over. Ryan Moretti. On her way home, Clara pulled up the note she had discreetly snapped on her phone. The numbers were undeniable. A man not only wealthy enough to give millions, but one who chose to do so in secret. It was a picture completely at odds with the bloodthirsty kingpin painted in headlines. Why? The question struck her like a hammer. If Ryan truly wanted to maintain his ruthless image, why pour enormous sums into saving hospitals, building schools, and funding orphanages? If he were the devil people claimed, would he bother to do such things in the shadows? Clara had no answer. That evening in her small apartment, Clara opened her laptop and laid out two sets of files side by side. On one side, the damning evidence of Ryan's illicit dealings. On the other, the photos she had just taken at the hospital and orphanage. Her heart tore itself in two. The journalist in her screamed, "The truth must be told. He's still dangerous, still the man pulling this city's strings." But another voice, softer, whispered, "What if truth has more than one face? What if truth knows how to hide?" Clara buried her head in her arms, hair spilling over her face. For the first time, she wasn't sure anymore. Night fell. Rain ticked softly against the windows. Clara stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. The article she had once been so certain would expose Ryan Moretti now blurred before her. She remembered the moment last night when she had drifted asleep against his arm. That memory made her pulse stumble, not because of tenderness, but because of contradiction. The man she sought to bring down had, perhaps unintentionally, revealed another side, a human one. Clara exhaled and typed slowly. Moretti, devil in the shadows or a man hiding behind the mask to protect another heart? Her fingers froze. The question wasn't only for her readers, it was for herself. At midnight, Clara closed her laptop and leaned back. Her eyes wandered to the glowing skyline. The city remained ablaze, riddled with shadows. Inside her chest, confusion swelled, terrifying, yet magnetic. She knew from the moment she uncovered this secret, her relationship with Ryan Moretti had shifted onto a different path, where truth and emotion tangled, with no clear boundaries. And for the first time, Clara wasn't sure where she wanted the truth to lead. The sea wind lashed her face, salty and thick with the stench of oil. Clara was shoved down onto the cold, damp wooden floor of an abandoned warehouse near the city's southern docks. Her hands were bound, her mouth dry. In front of her, shadows swayed under flickering yellow lights, rats scurrying between rusted containers. The man standing before her was Marco D'Angelo, one of Ryan's fiercest rivals. His massive frame filled the space, his wrinkled suit clinging to him, eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness and ambition. The little panther of the press, Marco sneered, tilting Clara's chin up with the barrel of his gun. You're not just a thorn in Moretti's side. You're his only weakness. Clara glared back, her voice hoarse. You're wrong. I'm nothing to him. Marco laughed, a dry, echoing sound rattling through the rotted beams. But he cares about you, and that's enough. Outside on the docks, a line of black cars screeched to a halt. Doors flew open and dozens of men in dark suits poured out, weapons hidden beneath their coats. They moved like a unit, a small army. Leading them, of course, was Ryan Moretti. His eyes were frozen steel, though fury burned beneath. News of Clara's abduction had driven him to abandon his usual caution. He couldn't let her die in Marco's hands, not just for pride, but for something he hadn't yet dared to name. Mr. Moretti, his right-hand man, Lorenzo murmured. Everything's ready. Your orders? Ryan drew his gun, the black barrel gleaming under the sodium lights. No one walks away if they lay a hand on her. Inside, Clara heard the synchronized steps. Then the warehouse doors slammed open. Cold light cut through the dark. Ryan appeared, tall, commanding, ripping through the gloom like a blade. Marco! His voice rang steady, though every syllable dripped with threat. Let her go! Marco chuckled, pressing the gun harder against Clara's temple. Look who's here! The mighty Moretti, throwing away his empire to save a little reporter. Sweet, isn't it? Ryan didn't flinch, his eyes locked. What do you want? Simple, Marco shrugged. Withdraw from this dock. Leave it to me. In return, the girl lives. Clara's heart pounded so loud she thought it might burst. This wasn't just personal, it was war between titans. And she was nothing but bait on the bargaining table. The silence stretched heavy. Then Ryan's mouth curved, his eyes flashing like a blade unsheathed. You forget one thing, Marco. I never negotiate when someone touches what's mine. The words cracked through the air like a shot, and then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, windows shattered, men crashed through the room, unleashing a storm of bullets. Clara screamed, falling back. Marco yanked her forward as a shield, but a round tore past, grazing his arm. He cursed and released her. Clara! Ryan roared, charging forward. Two of his men shielded her, pulling her to safety while Ryan went straight for Marco. Bullets hissed past his head, but Ryan moved with the precision of a man long accustomed to this deadly dance. He dropped Marco's men one by one, his eyes never wavering. Even through her terror, Clara saw it clearly. His men fought like soldiers ready to die for him. They weren't mercenaries bought with money. This was loyalty, absolute, unshakable loyalty, a kind she had never thought a cold-blooded kingpin could inspire. Marco tried to retreat, but Ryan closed in. They crashed together on the wooden floor, fists and kicks brutal, raw. Ryan said nothing. He let his rage speak, and in his eyes Clara saw another man. Not the cold figure in an immaculate suit, but someone fighting to the last breath for what he claimed as his. At last, Marco collapsed, blood staining the floorboards. He gasped, eyes rolling, as Ryan pressed the gun to his temple. Ryan's voice came low, almost a whisper. This is the price for touching Clara Hayes. A gunshot split the air. It was over. Silence returned, broken only by the waves pounding the dock. Clara trembled, stepping back, but her eyes clung to Ryan. He stood there, shirt splattered in blood, face carved with strain. Then he turned, walking toward her. His gray eyes were no longer icy, but weighed down by something unspoken. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, just as he had on that rainy night. You all right? His voice rasped. Clara nodded, though her insides were in chaos. She had just witnessed another Ryan Moretti, not only a man who ruled through fear, but one surrounded by men who would lay down their lives for him. A man who fought like hell to win back her safety. And it left Clara breathless with confusion. Did he really live only for himself, as she had always believed? Or in that darkness, was there a heart that made others choose absolute loyalty? On the ride away from the docks, Clara sat in the car, eyes fixed on the sea-streaked window. The engine rumbled and the lights faded behind them. Her mind kept replaying Ryan's words before the first shot was fired. I never negotiate when someone touches what's mine. Her heart thudded wildly. She couldn't tell if it was fear or something else kindling inside her that she didn't dare to name. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands are listening and sharing together. Night draped the city like a black veil, only distant strings of lights drifting beneath the glass walls. The penthouse was so quiet that the soft clink of a glass set on the table echoed. Clara stood a few steps away from Ryan, her gaze fixed on the dark stains of blood smeared across the cuff of his sleeve. "Let me see the wound," she said, her voice husky with exhaustion. Ryan started to waver off out of habit, but Clara's eyes didn't move. Calm and steady, he said nothing, unfastening his cuff. Beneath the fabric, a deep gash still bled, and bruising spread across his shoulder. He hadn't uttered a single complaint from the docks until now. Clara opened a side cabinet and found a first aid kit. Alcohol, gauze, tape. Her hand trembled slightly as she soaked the cotton ball, the sharp scent cutting through the lingering tang of sea oil on his shirt. "This will sting," she warned. "I'm used to it." His gray eyes looked down at her. Not angry now, just tired, stretched thin. "You didn't run. You dragged me into the middle of a war." "There wasn't time to run," Clara replied evenly. She pressed the cotton to his wound. He didn't flinch. The alcohol bit into torn flesh, his jaw tightening, the cords in his neck standing out. Clara realized how close she was, so close she could feel his breath against the back of her hand. "At the warehouse," she said, eyes still fixed on the wound, "you could have let him kill me. It would have been easier for you. No article, no reporter circling your every move." She paused, lifting her eyes. "Why didn't you?" The question dropped between them, heavy as a stone in still water. Ryan didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the window, where city lights shimmered like fish deep undersea. Long enough that Clara thought he might ignore it, as always. Then he turned back. "Because you're different," he said slowly, each word weighed as if testing its strength. "You make me want to believe." Clara froze. Believe. From a man whose life smelled of gunpowder and midnight deals, the word felt alien, almost misplaced. She waited, her heart stumbling. "I've met too many people," Ryan continued, voice lowered, "meant only for the two of them. Some come for fear, some for gain. Every word has a price, every handshake a condition. But not you. You looked me in the eye and talked about truth, even knowing it could kill you." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "6 years ago, you said it to a whole hall of people. Last night, you fell asleep on my arm, as if you didn't need any armor at all. You don't know it, but in that moment I realized, if anyone could make me want to try believing again, it's you." Clara bit her lip unconsciously. Something inside her shifted. Not fear, not victory, but a thin sliver of light cracking through her walls. Yet the journalist in her pushed back, and the next question slipped out like instinct. "Believe in what? That I'll stay silent? That I'll write what you want?" Ryan shook his head. "Believe that you'll write it all. Not half a truth. Not what comforts people. Not what someone pays to spread. Believe that you won't use words as a blade unless that blade saves someone." "You don't know me well enough to bet on that," Clara whispered. "Maybe," he admitted. "But for the first time in years, I want to bet." Silence fell again. The rain had stopped, leaving an empty space between them. Clara carefully taped the bandage over his wound, her fingers brushing his skin. Ryan stiffened, not from pain, but from the unexpected touch. "You could be lying," she said, eyes on the gauze, almost to herself. "You could be building a prettier version of yourself just to make me soften." "Yes," Ryan answered bluntly. "I could. And I've done it before with many people." He tilted his head, forcing her to meet his eyes. "But lies didn't keep you alive tonight. And they didn't stop my hands from shaking when you disappeared." His voice dropped, broken, as if he feared his own words. "I don't want you to disappear." A fine crack split the room, forming a fragile bridge between two enemies. Clara's throat tightened, her eyes stung in a way she hated. She didn't want to cry in front of him, didn't want to believe him. Yet sometimes the body moved before the mind. She set the bandage down, took a step, then another, and before she knew it, she was in his arms. Clara wrapped her arms around Ryan. Not a plea for protection, but an instinctive move to stop something collapsing inside her. Ryan froze, like he'd taken a blow not in any power play he'd rehearsed. Then slowly his arms closed around her. Warmth seeped through fabric, his heartbeat steadying. Clara pressed her cheek to his shoulder, the cedarwood scent now tinged with the metallic tang of dried blood. Her breathing shifted, no longer panicked, no longer guarded. "Don't mistake this," she whispered, reminding herself. "I'll still write." "I know," he said. "Just write the way you're holding me now, without trembling, without lying." She let out a short laugh against her breath, easing the tension. Strange comparison. But true, he said. They stayed like that for a long while. No kiss, no urgency. Just an embrace tight enough for them both to hear the silence change color. Clara realized sometimes the biggest things begin with the smallest gestures, small enough that reason hasn't had time to object. She pulled away first. Up close, Ryan's face showed signs of exhaustion, with new scrapes marking his skin. Her hand lifted, almost brushing one on his cheekbone, then hesitated, falling back. "And Marco," she said, "you pulled the trigger." "Yes." He didn't defend himself. For some men, the court is too slow. It comes after the children lose hospital beds, after a reporter becomes the headline of a single night. "I'm not proud, but I take responsibility." Clara nodded slightly. "Then let me take responsibility for my part." "How?" "By answering the question I asked in the last chapter." She straightened, fire rekindling in her eyes. "Are you the devil in the shadows, or a man hiding behind the mask to protect another heart?" "I won't choose the easy answer. I'll see it through." Ryan studied her, something like respect and worry flickering in his eyes. "Then don't walk alone." "I told you, just one night." Her words came out weaker than before. "Tomorrow morning, I leave." "Fine," he accepted without argument. "Tomorrow you leave. Tonight, sleep." She turned to the sofa. Only then did she feel the ache in her legs. Pulling a thin blanket over herself, she settled in. Ryan dimmed the lights, leaving a warm glow in the corner. "Ryan," she called softly as he started to walk away. "Yes?" "Tonight," Clara said, eyes on the window. "My answer is this. I trust you just enough to hold you, but not enough to sleep soundly." He stilled, then gave a faint nod. "Then I'll stay awake." The glass reflected his silhouette, a man standing guard in the night. Whether he was protecting her from the world or the world from her, Clara couldn't tell. She closed her eyes. Outside, the city still pulsed awake. Inside, something else had stirred, quiet, steady, and more dangerous than any bullet. They both knew. From this embrace, there was no turning back. But at least tonight, they had named something thought long dead in them both. Trust. And even as the smallest seed in a stone, it was enough to change the color of the dark. The shrill ring of the phone dragged Clara out of restless sleep. Morning light streamed through the penthouse windows, but instead of peace, chaos crashed into her mind. She grabbed the phone. Dozens of messages flashed across the screen. "Clara, what did you do? That article, who gave permission to release it? The whole city's in an uproar. Moretti's about to explode." Clara shot upright, blood draining from her face. She opened the Herald-Times homepage, and her heart plunged into a void. The article about Ryan Moretti was there, front and center. The headline, the content, it was hers but not her final draft. It was the version she had hesitated over, unfinished, never meant to see daylight. And yet now every sentence, every detail about Ryan's underworld empire, about his shadowed life, was plastered for the public to devour. Someone had published it, a colleague from her own newsroom. Clara rushed into the office, her heart pounding. The third floor buzzed with whispers. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others full of scorn. The editor-in-chief was waiting in his office. He slammed his palm on the desk, voice sharp as a whip. "Clara, what the hell are you playing at? Do you have any idea what that article has set off?" Her throat tightened. "I never sent it." "That was just a draft." "Who?" "Jason," the editor snapped, his eyes hard. "He pulled the file off the server. Said it was breaking news that had to be exposed immediately." Clara's head spun. Jason, the colleague she once trusted, the one she had spent long nights writing with, he had sold her out, and sold Ryan out too. I have to stop it. I have to correct it, Clara stammered. Too late. The editor shook his head. It's everywhere now. Social media's on fire. The police are calling with questions, and if Moretti comes looking, this newsroom will be the first target. You'd better pray you make it out alive. Clara stumbled out of the building like a ghost. Outside, crowds had gathered, waving newspapers with bold headlines. Moretti, the shadow kingpin, controlling the city? Her blood ran cold. Every word on that page was a blade, not only stabbing into Ryan, but into her own heart. She knew he was dangerous, knew he wasn't clean. But after what she had seen, the hospital, the orphanage, the loyalty of his men, Clara couldn't see him as just a monster anymore. He was complicated. He was human. And she had fallen in love with him. And now her profession had become a weapon that turned him into prey for the entire city. When Clara returned to the penthouse, the vast room no longer felt still. The air was taut like a drawn wire. Ryan stood at the window, hand gripping a glass of whiskey, gray eyes fixed on the chaos below. The blare of police sirens, cameras flashing in the streets. Ryan, Clara's voice shook. I didn't do this. I didn't publish that article. He turned. There was no explosive anger in his gaze, only something worse. Absolute coldness. But it's out there, he said, each word heavy, and it's painted a target on my head. I was betrayed, Jason took dash. Clara. His voice cut rough, low. I believe you, but no one else will. And in my world, trust is a luxury. You've just made us pray for every enemy I have. Her chest tightened. For the first time, she heard something in his voice. Not just coldness, but a fracture, as if he was disappointed. I'm sorry. Her throat burned. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. Ryan set down the glass, stepped closer. His eyes locked onto hers, deep and dark as an abyss. Clara Hayes, he said softly, you're hurting me simply by existing in my life. Clara collapsed onto a chair, tears pricking hot. Everything she had once believed in, journalistic ideals, faith in truth, now felt like a double-edged blade. She had fought to defend justice, only to trap the man she loved in the crosshairs. The man I love. The words thundered inside her. She didn't know when it had begun, only that the realization now doubled the pain tearing her apart. Ryan watched her for a long moment before turning away. He pulled out his phone and spoke to Lorenzo. Gather the men. Prepare for anything. If anyone touches Clara, kill them. Clara looked up, stunned. What are you doing? I caused this. You don't have to. Shut up. Ryan spun back, his eyes flashing with ferocity. You don't understand. The moment you were dragged into this, you stopped being an innocent reporter. You're mine. And if the world wants to use you as bait, then I'll burn the world to ash. The words struck Clara breathless, half declaration, half sentence. That night, Clara lay awake on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. Every moment replayed. The embrace, the confession, Ryan's eyes. And now that cursed article, born of betrayal, had shattered it all. She had never felt so torn. Her heart ached to run to him, to tell him she believed in him. But her reason whispered the cruel truth. She had put him in danger. In the dark, Clara whispered to herself, I'm sorry, Ryan. I let the truth become a blade instead of a salvation. Outside, the city blazed with lights and cameras, a pack of predators scenting blood. And for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't sure if truth could save anyone anymore. The rain poured down in sheets, hammering against the rusted tin roofs of the harbor district. Clara ran, breath ragged, shoes slapping against the rain-slick pavement. Behind her, footsteps thundered, deliberate, closing in. Gunshots cracked through the night. A bullet grazed her shoulder, scorching hot as it tore through her thin blouse. Clara stumbled, crashing into a puddle. Pain exploded through her body, vision blurring at the edges. Clara! His voice cut through the storm. Deep, hoarse, unmistakable. Ryan burst from the alley's corner, a silhouette carved from steel beneath the streetlights. Without hesitation, he charged, firing back at their pursuers. Each shot rang out precisely, mercilessly. Screams echoed, then faded, until only Rain and Clara's shallow breathing remained. He dropped to his knees, gathering her trembling body against him. His hand pressed firmly against the bleeding wound. "Clara, look at me," he ordered, voice taut with urgency. She forced her eyes open, lips curling into a weak smile. "You really do have good timing." "Shut up," Ryan snapped, but his voice wavered. He lifted her into his arms, his body drenched but radiating warmth. His strides were long, desperate, like a man trying to steal time back from fate. Against his chest, Clara heard his heart pounding wildly. For the first time, she realized, the man the whole city feared could still panic over the loss of one life, her life. The storm turned the empty streets into rivers of water. Ryan carried Clara through the flood, breath harsh, muscles tight. He clutched her as though letting go meant losing her forever. "Don't close your eyes," he rasped, his voice breaking. "If you disappear, I've got nothing left." The words sliced through her pain, straight into her heart. Rain mingled with tears as Clara whispered, smiling faintly, "You almost sound like you need me." Ryan stopped dead in the storm. His gray eyes burned like fire through the downpour. He didn't deny it. Instead, he bent down, pressing his lips to her forehead, holding there long enough for them both to shake. In an abandoned warehouse near the docks, a single lamp flickered weakly across their soaked bodies. Ryan laid Clara onto a blanket, spread hastily across the floor. The wound in her shoulder was wrapped, but her face was pale, her breath uneven. Ryan sat beside her, hands that had once gripped guns now trembling as they brushed her cheek, gentle, almost clumsy, as if he feared she might break. "I should have kept you away from me from the start," he whispered, "but I couldn't. You stepped in, and I lost the power to push you out." Clara's eyes shone despite her exhaustion. "You don't have to push me away. I chose this. Even if it means being shot at, even if it means dying, it's still my choice." Silence swelled between them, broken only by rain beating on the tin roof. Then Ryan leaned down, this time not just her forehead. His mouth found hers, their first kiss. It wasn't soft, like in movies. It was fierce, raw, drenched in blood, rain, and gunpowder. And yet that wildness made Clara feel safe, because nothing outside those walls could touch her when he was here. She kissed him back, weak fingers gripping his wet shirt, pulling him closer. That night under the storm, they crossed a line. No longer kingpin and reporter, no longer hunter and prey, only a man and a woman clinging to each other as if the world might collapse before dawn. Every touch, every breath was a vow. There was no going back. When the rain eased at last, Clara lay curled against Ryan's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Her eyelids fluttered shut as she murmured, "Maybe someday I'll still write about you. But it'll be a different story, not one made of darkness alone." Ryan tightened his hold, eyes fixed on the dim lamplight. "No matter how you write it, Clara, you've already carved your name into my life. No headline will ever erase that." She smiled faintly as sleep pulled her under. And in that fragile, fleeting rest, Clara knew tonight was the turning point. From this moment on, neither of their lives would ever be the same. The city sky was heavy and gray, as though the storm from that fateful night had never truly passed. Clara sat alone in the clinic, fingers knotted tightly together, her heartbeat unsteady. The ticking of the clock dragged on, each second louder than the last, until the door opened and the doctor stepped in, holding the ultrasound report. "Congratulations," the doctor said gently. "You're pregnant. And it's twins." The world seemed to stop. Clara's eyes widened, the paper trembling in her hands. The image of two tiny dots on the ultrasound screen was burned into her mind. Two lives, two heartbeats, two fragile beginnings inside her. On the way back, Clara couldn't stop asking herself questions. Whose children? The answer was obvious, painfully so. Ryan's. But another fear rose inside her. Would her children grow up in darkness or in light? She remembered the blood-stained docks, the merciless gunfire, Ryan's eyes as he pulled the trigger. Would these innocent babies be chained to that same shadowed world? Or could they be given a chance at something different, a life without bullets and vengeance? She had no answer. When Clara returned to the penthouse, Ryan was, as always, standing by the window, his gaze cast over the city below. He turned when he saw her pale face and frown. "What happened?" he demanded, striding toward her. Clara hesitated, then handed the report to him. "I'm pregnant, with twins." For a moment, Ryan froze. The glass of whiskey on the table still smoked with melting ice, but he didn't reach for it. His gray eyes lost their familiar steel, replaced by something else, something almost unsteady. Slowly, he sat down, gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled, but the corners of his mouth lifted into a rare smile, not sharp with irony, but almost fragile. "Twins," he repeated as if afraid he had misheard. "Clara, you're carrying my children." Clara's eyes shimmered. "I'm scared, Ryan. I'm scared they'll grow up in the dark, that the name Moretti will be a burden, not a shield. I don't want my children to know guns, blood, or hate." Ryan stayed silent for a long time. Then he leaned forward, placing a hand gently on her stomach, as though touching the most delicate treasure in the world. "Listen to me, Clara," he whispered. "I've lived my whole life in the dark, but they won't. I swear to you, I'll protect you and our children with everything I have. I'll bend this world if I have to, just to build them a home in the light." Clara didn't know whether to believe him, but his eyes no longer belonged to a kingpin issuing orders. They belonged to a man who had just been handed a second chance at life, and that chance was family. She placed her hand over his. "Are you sure you can do it? The world out there doesn't change so easily." Ryan pressed his lips together. "I can't promise the world, but I can promise myself. I built an empire from nothing. I can tear it down, if that's what it takes to keep you and the children safe." The words made Clara's throat tighten. For the first time, his determination wasn't for power or wealth. It was for something purer. That night, Clara stood on the balcony, the night wind tugging at her hair, her eyes drifting toward the horizon. Ryan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, one hand resting firmly over her stomach. "Do you remember that night in the rain?" he asked softly. "When I almost lost you?" "How could I forget?" Clara whispered. Ryan rested his chin on her shoulder. "That night I thought, if you disappeared, I'd have nothing left. Now I have 3 reasons to survive, to fight against everything, you and our 2 little ones." Clara shut her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She couldn't be sure that love alone could stand against the world, but she knew one thing. She had never felt more held than in that moment. In Ryan's silent vow, a promise burned. "No matter who I am, no matter if the whole city calls me a devil, to you and our children, I will be a shield. I will protect you until my last breath." And for the first time, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, it could be true. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The cold wind off the docks howled through the stacked containers, carrying the brine of the sea and the sharp stench of oil. Tonight, the city seemed to be holding its breath. The rumor had spread fast. Ryan's greatest enemy, Salvatore Ricci, a seasoned kingpin of the underworld, was stepping out of the shadows. No more ambushes, no more traps in the dark. This would be a face-to-face reckoning, the final battle. Clara sat in the car, fists clenching her coat. Her stomach had begun to round, the twins proof of that fateful stormy night, but her heart beat with a fear she had never known. She hadn't been able to persuade Ryan to back down. He had only looked at her, eyes unwavering, words sharp enough to choke her silent. "Clara, this is something I have to end. If I don't, there won't be a tomorrow for you or the children." When they arrived at the docks, shadows already lined both sides. Floodlights cut across the night, gleaming off dozens of gun barrels. Ryan stepped forward, tall and unyielding in his black suit, damp with sea mist. His men spread behind him, loyal, waiting for orders. From the opposite side, Salvatore emerged, a man with silver hair, a face carved with scars and a smile dripping with malice. His voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Moretti, you've been a thorn in my side for years. Tonight I tear you out by the root." Ryan's reply was ice-cold steel. "Try it, but if you so much as touch her," his eyes flicked toward Clara, "I'll drag your entire bloodline to hell with you." The first shots rang out. Chaos exploded. Bullets ripped through the night. Blood splattered across the wet cement. Lorenzo yanked Clara behind a container, but she still saw Ryan throw himself into the blaze of gunfire, never flinching. Each shot he fired dropped a man, but the enemy kept coming, wave after endless wave. Clara trembled, tears mixing with salt air. She wanted to scream for him to stop, to run into his arms, but her legs refused to move. Salvatore stepped forward, gun raised. Ryan spun, intercepting a bullet aimed straight at Clara. The round slammed into his shoulder, blood spraying red. "Ryan!" Clara screamed, her throat tearing. He staggered, teeth gritted, but kept firing. In the frenzy, Salvatore snarled, signaling his men to unleash a hailstorm of bullets. Ryan twisted, wrapping Clara in his arms, his body the only shield between her and death. "You're insane," Clara sobbed, feeling his blood soak into her clothes. His voice came low, strained but steady. "If you disappear, I've got nothing left. I'd rather lose everything than lose you and our children." An explosion ripped through the night. A container ignited, flames swallowing the dock in roaring light. Smoke smothered the air. In the chaos, Clara felt Ryan shove her hard into Lorenzo's grip. "Get her out of here," he bellowed. "No! Ryan!" Clara fought wildly, but Lorenzo's arms were iron. Through the smoke and fire, she caught one last glimpse of him. Gun raised high, charging back into the storm of enemies. Gunfire thundered. Then a single deafening blast split the night apart. Flames lit the sky, and Ryan's figure vanished. Clara's scream was swallowed by Lorenzo, dragging her away, her tears blinding her. She kicked, clawed, eyes locked on the inferno. "No! He's not dead! I know he's not dead!" But all around her, heads bowed. The rumor spread like wildfire. Ryan Moretti had perished in the final battle. Days later, the headlines screamed across every front page, "Crime Lord Moretti dead in bloody dockside shootout." The city reeled. Those who had feared him sighed in relief. Those who had hated him reveled in triumph. The streets buzzed as if a nightmare had finally ended. Only Clara sat in her small apartment, hands on her growing belly, tears streaming silently. She heard the 2 faint heartbeats on the ultrasound machine and clung to a vow that burned inside her. "You're not dead. I won't believe it. Ryan Moretti isn't someone who falls so easily. You'll come back, for me and for our children." That night, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. The wind cut cold across her face, tossing her hair. In the distance, the lighthouse blinked. She lifted her eyes to the dark sky, whispering into the night, "Where are you, Ryan? If you're still alive, hear me. I'll wait. Even if the whole world believes you're gone, I'll still believe." Her eyes shone, not only from tears, but from a fierce flame, the fire of love. Love Ryan had proven with blood and sacrifice. And deep inside her, she knew with unshakable certainty, someday, somehow, he would return. Autumn painted the countryside gold, the wind carrying the scent of dry grass and the cheerful songs of young birds. A small wooden house nestled beneath rows of crimson maples had become Clara's whole world for the past 2 years. 2 years since that fateful night at the docks. 2 years since Ryan vanished into the inferno. The entire city was convinced the kingpin Moretti was dead. Clara had left journalism soon after. No more articles, no more chases, no more tense newsroom meetings. She had given her entire heart to 2 tiny souls, the twins, the final gift he had left her. That morning, the sky was crystal clear. Clara sat on the porch watching her children play on the lawn. The little boy, his dark hair tousled, laughed as he wrestled a toy car from his sister's hands. The little girl whose bright gray eyes mirrored Ryan's. Clara couldn't help but laugh. Simple joys like this had kept her alive through endless days of grief. There had been moments she wanted to believe he was truly gone. But every night, when she heard the steady beats of her children's hearts, when she looked into their eyes, she whispered to herself, Ryan is still alive. He never left me. The wind stirred across the porch. Clara bent down to tie her son's shoelace when suddenly a tall figure appeared at the end of the tree-lined road. His steps were slow, uneven, with the faint limp of an old wound, but familiar enough to seize her heart in a vice. Clara shot to her feet. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The man came closer, his dark coat dusted from the road, his face marked with new scars. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were unchanged, the same ones that had once held her through the rain. "Ryan," Clara whispered, tears rising. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he bent down, arms trembling as he lifted the twins into his embrace. The children threw their little arms around his neck with instinctive delight, as if they already knew this man was their blood. Ryan held them tight, his voice hoarse and breaking. "Ours!" Clara's legs gave way, and she ran to him, sobbing as she threw her arms around all three. Ryan dropped to his knees, pulling her close, his embrace a fortress. "You're alive!" "Oh God, Ryan, I knew it. I believed," Clara cried. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in like salvation. "I'm sorry. I left you alone for far too long." Later, they sat on the porch while the children played in the autumn sun. Clara held his hand, her eyes roaming over every scar. "What happened?" she asked softly. Ryan's gaze drifted to the distance. "I took too many bullets that night. When the fire spread, Lorenzo and a few loyal men dragged me out. I was in a coma for weeks. Lying in that bed, I had a lot of time to think." He tightened his grip on her hand, voice firm. "I realized if I went back, if I kept living as Moretti in the shadows, I'd lose you and the children. So I let the world believe I was dead. Let them bury the name Moretti. I chose to give it all up." Clara's tears spilled, but her lips curved in a trembling smile. "You chose family." "Yes." Ryan laid a warm hand over her stomach, where two lives had once grown. "I chose you and our children. Power used to mean everything. Now it means nothing. Family. That's what I'll hold until my last breath." By noon, the four of them were gathered around the small dining table. Ryan spoon-fed soup to his son, while Clara wiped crumbs from her daughter's cheek. Laughter filled the room, banishing the ghosts of the past. Clara looked at Ryan, her heart swelling with emotion. The icy glint of the kingpin was gone from his eyes, replaced by the gentle light of a father and a husband. "You know," Clara whispered, "for 2 years I kept telling myself that one day the dawn would bring you back. Today, that dawn finally came." Ryan leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I swear, there will never be another night that keeps us apart." That afternoon, with the twins asleep in their cribs, Clara and Ryan sat together on the porch. Maple leaves rustled, the sky glowing a golden hue. Ryan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Clara," he murmured, "do you regret it? Walking away from journalism, living hidden like this?" She tilted her head, smiling through fresh tears. "If I could choose again, I'd still choose this. I don't need city lights or front-page headlines. I only need this." She placed her hand over his scarred one. "Us, our family." Ryan closed his eyes, exhaling a long breath, as though releasing every shadow he had carried. He kissed her, softly, tenderly, like sunlight filtering through leaves. By dusk, the small house glowed in the golden blaze of sunset. Clara cradled their daughter while Ryan carried their son. Together, the four of them stood on the porch, watching the sun sink beyond the fields. No more gunfire, no more shadows, only the laughter of children, the embrace of family, and the promise of a new dawn. Clara rested her head against Ryan's shoulder, whispering, "Thank you for coming back." He pulled her and the twins tight, his voice steady, a vow etched in the air. "I've left the darkness behind to live in this light with you and our children." As the sky blazed red, Clara knew their long road of loss and pain had finally come to a close. Before them stretched a new path, the path of love, of family, of life.